We all saw the scorecard. We all saw the handshake. But most importantly, we all saw the numbers. Jeremy and Audrey Roloff supposedly won the battle for the farm by a razor-thin 7% profit margin. It was the climax of the season, the moment that was supposed to settle the legacy once and for all. But we have uncovered evidence that suggests those numbers didn't just add up. They were cooked. We are taking you back to the wedding barn on Halloween night, not to look at the pumpkins, but to reveal the invisible hand that actually tallied those votes. It wasn't a third-party accounting firm. It was the one person who stood to lose absolutely everything if Zach took control. The 7% margin wasn't a victory. It was a mathematical impossibility unless someone intervened. That someone wasn't Matt. It was Caryn. And the reason isn't just about money. It's about a secret acquisition plan that started 3 days before the cameras even started rolling. If you want us to release the lost receipts and expose the truth behind the Roloff legacy, hit that like button right now. We need to get this video out to as many fans as possible to demand answers. And make sure you are subscribed to LPBW Update with notifications on, because what we are revealing in this series is going to change how you watch every single rerun of this show. You do not want to miss the forensic breakdown coming up. Let's tear down the foundational lie. The narrative they fed us was simple. Jeremy engaged in modern influencer marketing, bringing in high-ticket sales through the VIP experience, while Zach focused on sweat equity and traditional farming. On paper, it looked like Jeremy simply out-earned Zach through better branding. But we have spoken with sources close to production who claim that the profit and loss statements shown on camera were heavily sanitized. The lie isn't about the pumpkins, it is about the overhead. The script revealed that Jeremy built a VIP lounge and launched an artisanal cider line for the competition. These are massive upfront costs. In the real world, construction, permits, branding design, and bottling are expensive operating costs that should have decimated his short-term profit margin. But look at the scorecard again. Jeremy's expenses were suspiciously low. We have reason to believe that the massive costs of the VIP lounge were quietly categorized as capital improvements rather than operating expenses by Matt's financial team. By classifying these expenses as long-term assets for the farm, they removed them from the competition's immediate expense sheet. This artificially inflated Jeremy's profit margin to look like a sustainable business win. Meanwhile, Zach's labor costs, the fuel for the tractors, and the raw materials for his traditional approach were fully deducted as standard operating expenses. They compared Jeremy's gross revenue against Zach's net profit. It was never an apples-to-apples comparison. It was a rigged game of accounting gymnastics designed to make the influencer model look superior to the farming model. But why? Why go to such lengths to skew the math by just 7%? Because a landslide victory would have looked suspicious. A 7% win looks like a hard-fought battle. It looks like great television. But more importantly, it justifies the business pivot that Matt and Caryn had been planning for months. This brings us to the business trip. Do you remember that private dinner Matt had with Jeremy and Audrey before the contest began? The one where he laid out the orange folder? The show framed this as a father giving his son advice. But we need to talk about where Caryn was. We have learned that Caryn Chandler allegedly took a separate unfilmed trip to Arizona 3 days prior to that dinner. Flight logs and social media geotags suggest she wasn't just visiting her parents. Sources allege she met with a real estate developer who specializes in agritourism, the exact business model Jeremy proposed in his pitch. Connect the dots. If Caryn was already meeting with developers to turn the farm into a high-end resort destination, she needed the son who aligned with that vision to win. Zach wanted to keep the farm a farm. He wanted goats, pumpkins, and privacy. Jeremy and Audrey wanted a brand, a venue, and a destination. Jeremy's win wasn't just a contest result, It was a soft launch for a pre-planned acquisition that Caryn had seemingly already brokered in the desert. The contest was a formality. The winner had been chosen before the first seed was even planted. Let's look at the overlooked protagonist of this entire saga, Caryn Chandler. In the script and the final edit, she is portrayed as a passive observer during the shouting matches, often looking uncomfortable or trying to mediate. But look closer at the footage from that Halloween night. When the results were read, everyone had a visceral emotional reaction. Amy was devastated. Matt looked conflicted. Zach looked furious. But Caryn, she didn't cry. She didn't look shocked. She looked relieved. She is the only one who maintained total composure. While the family was distracted by the emotional weight of Matt's health struggles and the Lewy body dementia diagnosis that was looming over the season, Caryn was securing her own golden parachute. She knew that if Zach won, the farm would stay in the family, but the cash flow would tighten. Zach is frugal. Zach is traditional. There is no room for a property manager salary in Zach's version of Roloff Farms. But under Jeremy's influencer resort model, that requires management. That requires a liaison. That requires Caryn. She ensured the son who would commercialize the farm won, not the son who would keep it. The smoking gun in this conspiracy is the sealed envelope presented by Chris Marek. The producers went out of their way to establish Chris as the ultimate neutral party, the Switzerland of Roloff Farms. But ask yourself, who handed Chris the envelope? Matt. And who prepared the data for Matt? Caryn. Chris Marek didn't audit the numbers. He simply read what was handed to him. There is a deleted scene that insiders have told us about, a moment that was cut from the final broadcast because it broke the fourth wall. Allegedly, minutes before the reveal, Zach asked to see the raw receipts for the VIP lounge construction. He knew the cost of lumber. He knew the cost of permits. He knew Jeremy couldn't have turned a profit with those overheads. And what happened? Matt suddenly claimed he felt unsteady. The filming stopped. The cameras went down. Production scrambled. They never showed Zach the receipts. They used Matt's physical vulnerability to shut down Zach's forensic inquiry. When the cameras came back up, Zach was silent, brooding, and defeated. He wasn't defeated by the math. He was defeated by the manipulation of his father's health to hide the truth. This betrayal goes deeper than just a rigged contest. Matt used his own terminal diagnosis as a shield to hide financial manipulation. By claiming he didn't have time to apprentice Zach, he forced a contest he knew Zach would lose because the metrics were weighted toward revenue, not farming. He betrayed Zach's loyalty, not just for a legacy, but to liquidate the asset through Jeremy's brand. The tragedy here is that Zach was playing a game of loyalty, while Matt and Caryn were playing a game of liquidation. We have to talk about the legal threat that happened on the porch. Our source confirms that minutes after the cameras cut to black, Zach didn't just walk away to his car. He leaned in and whispered 2 words to Matt that have caused the current fracture in the family. He didn't say goodbye, Dad. He whispered, "Forensic Audit." This is why the family is fractured today. It is not about hurt feelings or who got the big house. It is about a pending lawsuit regarding the valuation of the Roloff Legacy Trust. Zach knows. He knew the numbers were impossible. And he knows that the 7% profit margin was a fabrication created to steal his birthright. Think about the timing of everything. Why did Matt suddenly decide that the farm had to be split or contested now? Why the urgency? The show claims it was because of his declining health, but if you look at public records, there were zoning changes applied for on the property months before the diagnosis was made public. Zoning changes that allow for multi-use commercial structures. That isn't a farm, that's a hotel. That is the Arizona Developers Plan. And who handles all the permit applications for the farm? Caryn. The conspiracy here is that the battle for the farm was a distraction. It was a reality TV storyline manufactured to cover up a corporate restructuring of the Roloff assets. They needed a storyline that ended with the commercialization of the property being justified by market forces and profitability. If Matt just handed the farm to Jeremy, the audience would revolt. But if Jeremy won a contest based on profit, then the transition to a commercial resort feels earned. It feels like meritocracy, but it was kleptocracy. It was theft. Consider the role of the production team in this. Did they know, or were they just as manipulated as Zach? Reality TV producers love drama, but they hate being lied to by their talent. If Matt and Caryn cooked the books to alter the ending of the show, they violated their contracts. This is why the release of the lost receipts is so dangerous for the Roloff family. It doesn't just expose a family feud, it exposes potential contract fraud. If Zach follows through with the forensic audit, it won't just be the farm that falls apart. It will be the entire LPBW franchise. We need to circle back to the VIP lounge. Visually, it was stunning. It looked great on camera. But let's break down the economics of a pop-up luxury experience on a pumpkin farm. The staffing costs alone for the white glove service Jeremy offered would have eaten 40% of the revenue. The custom cider bottling, another 30%. The marketing spend, Audrey's social media ads aren't free. When you add it all up, Jeremy should have been operating at a loss for the first season. That is standard for any new luxury business. Yet, he posted a profit, and not just a profit, but a profit that beat an established low overhead farming operation. It defies the laws of business, unless, of course, the labor was off the books. There are rumors that the staff used for Jeremy's event were not paid out of the competition budget, but were paid by the farm's general payroll. If Matt paid Jeremy's staff, that is a direct subsidy, that is a donation. If you take the labor cost out of Jeremy's column and put it back in, his 7% profit becomes a 20% loss. Zach wins by a landslide. This is the math they are hiding. This is the 7% lie. And where was Amy in all of this? Amy has been pushed to the sidelines, framed as the bitter ex-wife who can't let go. But maybe she isn't bitter. Maybe she is suspicious. In the episodes leading up to the vote, Amy kept asking specific questions about the long-term viability of Jeremy's plan. She was shut down every time. Matt would roll his eyes and Caryn would change the subject. Amy knows how the farm finances work. She ran that administrative side for 30 years. She knows you can't build a VIP lounge for free. Her silence during the finale wasn't resignation. It was shock. She was doing the mental math in real time and realized the fix was in. Let's go deeper down the rabbit hole. We ended the last part with Zach's two-word threat, forensic audit. That wasn't an empty threat. It was a declaration of war. A war not against his father, but against the house of cards that Caryn Chandler allegedly built around the Roloff family finances. To understand how deep this betrayal goes, we need to dissect the anatomy of the 7% lie. It wasn't just one lie. It was a series of calculated financial misdirections designed to create a specific outcome. The core of the manipulation, as we mentioned, was the distinction between operating expenses and capital improvements. For those of you who don't run a business, let me break it down in the simplest terms. Imagine you and your sibling are in a one-day bake sale contest. You both start with $100. You spend $50 on flour, sugar, and eggs. Your sibling spends $50 on a brand new top-of-the-line oven. At the end of the day, you both sell $200 worth of cookies. When the judge asks for your profit, you have to report your $50 expense on ingredients, leaving you with a $150 profit. But your sibling, with the help of a clever accountant, argues that the oven is a long-term asset, an improvement to the kitchen, so its costs shouldn't count against their one-day sales. They get to report the full $200 in profit. They win the contest. That is what happened on Roloff Farms. Zach's expenses were the flour, sugar, and eggs. His fuel, his seeds, the wages for the part-time help he needed to manage the fields, those were all correctly deducted as operating costs. Jeremy's VIP lounge was the brand new oven. The construction materials, the designer furniture, the custom lighting. Our sources claim these were all funneled through the farm's general ledger as capital improvements. They were investments in the farm's future, not expenses for the pumpkin season contest. This one accounting trick could easily account for a 30 to 40% swing in the profit margin. The 7% lie wasn't just a lie, it was an insult. It was just enough to give Jeremy the win without raising too many red flags for the casual viewer. But we are not casual viewers. We have a report from an individual we will call the farmhand, who was present during the setup for the competition. The farmhand alleges that truckloads of high-end, reclaimed barnwood and vintage fixtures arrived for Jeremy's lounge. When questions were asked about the budget, the answer was always the same. It's coming out of the farm account. Matt approved it. Jeremy was essentially given an unlimited budget, with the costs absorbed by the parent company, Roloff Farms LLC, while Zach was forced to operate within the strict confines of his own limited competition budget. He was paying market price for his supplies, while his brother was building a luxury lounge with house money. The competition wasn't just rigged, it was subsidized. And what about artisanal cider? A project like that requires months of lead time. You need to source the apples, design the labels, get permits for bottling, and pay for the production run. According to our insider, the initial invoices for the cider production were paid for by Matt months before the contest was even announced on camera. The cider wasn't a competition idea, it was part of the pre-planned business pivot. Jeremy didn't invent a new product line. He simply put his face on a project that was already in motion, paid for by his father, and managed by Caryn. All of the startup costs were hidden, and he was allowed to present the revenue as pure profit from his own brilliant idea. It was a masterful piece of television production, but a fraudulent business competition. Now, let's circle back to that Arizona trip. This is a critical piece of the puzzle. Caryn's unfilmed meeting with the agritourism developer wasn't just a casual chat. We've been told the development firm specializes in turning family farms into high-end, all-inclusive wedding venues and glamping resorts. Their business model is to partner with landowners, redevelop the property, and take a massive percentage of the future revenue. This wasn't a fact-finding mission. This was a negotiation. Caryn was allegedly there to finalize the terms of a deal that would be triggered the moment Jeremy was declared the winner of the farm. We have to ask the question, was Matt Roloff aware of the specifics of this meeting? Was he on a conference call while Caryn was shaking hands with the developer? Or was he led to believe it was a more passive, exploratory conversation? This is where the tragedy of Matt's health becomes a factor. A man dealing with the terrifying diagnosis of Lewy body dementia is not in a position to be scrutinizing complex real estate contracts. He is vulnerable. He is relying on his partner to handle the details. The theory that our sources present is that Caryn used Matt's trust in his vulnerable state to push through an aggressive commercialization plan that served her own long-term financial interests. She knew Matt wanted a legacy, and she sold him a vision of a bustling, profitable resort that would bear his name for generations. What she didn't tell him was that it would cost him his relationship with his other son. The developer's plan, which Jeremy's proposal mirrored almost perfectly, required a complete overhaul of the farm's brand. It needed to be less about pumpkins and family and more about luxury, exclusivity, and Instagrammable moments. It needed an influencer at the helm, not a farmer. Jeremy and Audrey, with their massive social media following and carefully curated brand, were the perfect frontmen for this new venture. Zach and Tori, with their focus on family, accessibility, and the simple joys of farm life, were a direct threat to that model. They had to be sidelined. The contest was the tool to make it happen. This brings us to Chris Merrick, the man who read the verdict. We've been told repeatedly that Chris is neutral, but let's look at his position. He's married to Amy, who clearly favored Zach's approach. But he's also trying to build a peaceful relationship with Matt and Caryn. He is caught in the middle. The show presented him as an impartial auditor, but he never saw the books. He was handed a single sheet of paper, a summary prepared by Caryn and approved by Matt. He was a master of ceremonies, not a forensic accountant. An interesting tidbit from a production assistant alleges that on the day of the reveal, just before filming, Chris privately asked Matt, "Are you sure this is a good idea, Matt? These numbers are going to break your family apart." Matt's response was reportedly curt and dismissive. "It's just business, Chris. They'll get over it." This exchange, if true, shows that Matt was aware of the potential fallout, but was committed to the outcome. Chris was put in an impossible position: read the numbers he was given or create a massive conflict on camera by questioning his friend's integrity. He chose to play his part, likely hoping the family would work it out later. He was an unwitting accomplice in a perfectly executed deception. The chain of custody for the results was a closed loop. Caryn prepared the data, Matt signed off on it, and Chris read it. Zach never stood a chance. Now let's deconstruct the on-screen drama we all watched. The endless shouting matches, the tears, the family meetings that went nowhere. The show's editors want you to believe this was all about emotional disagreements over the farm's future. But if you rewatch those scenes with the knowledge of financial manipulation, everything changes. Zach's frustration wasn't just about his dad not listening to his ideas. It was about his dad refusing to show him the numbers. In several scenes, you can hear Zach asking, "But how are we paying for this?" Or "What's the budget for that?" These questions are always brushed aside by Matt, who reframes the conversation around vision and legacy. The family was having two completely different conversations. Zach was trying to have a business meeting, and Matt was performing for the cameras. The emotional core of the season, Matt's Lewy body dementia diagnosis, became the ultimate tool for narrative control. Anytime Zach or Amy pushed too hard for financial transparency, Caryn would step in with a gentle but firm, "Let's not upset your father. He's not well." It was the perfect way to shut down any line of questioning that threatened to expose the rigged game. It weaponized the family's love and concern for Matt against Zach's legitimate business inquiries. It painted Zach as insensitive and greedy for talking about money when his father was sick, while in reality, he was the only one trying to prevent the financial betrayal that was happening in plain sight. Where do Jeremy and Audrey fit into this? Were they masterminds of the conspiracy? Unlikely. They were more likely willing beneficiaries. They were so consumed with their own brand, their own vision of what the farm could be, that they chose not to look too closely at the numbers that were getting them there. When your father is offering you an unlimited budget to build your dream project, you don't ask too many questions. They saw an opportunity to get everything they ever wanted, and they took it. Their sin wasn't masterminding the lie, but their willful blindness to it. They accepted the win without ever questioning how a pop-up luxury lounge could possibly outprofit a generations-old farming model in a single season. They wanted the narrative of their own business genius to be true, so they never scratched the surface to see the rot underneath. The aftermath of the vote is where the legal reality of the situation comes into focus. Zach's whisper of forensic audit was the first shot in a Cold War. A forensic audit of Roloff Farms would be a catastrophic event for Matt and Caryn. It wouldn't just look at the receipts for the pumpkin season contest. It would involve lawyers and accountants going through years of financial records. They would scrutinize every major transaction, every land deal, and every salary paid. Specifically, an audit would investigate the valuation of the farm, at the time of Amy's buyout. Did Matt and Caryn undervalue the property's development potential to lower Amy's payout, only to then turn around and pursue a multi-million-dollar commercial development deal? That could be grounds for a massive lawsuit from Amy. It would also look at how farm income and expenses have been managed for tax purposes. Are personal expenses being written off as business costs? Are employees being paid properly? A forensic audit threatens to unravel the entire financial foundation of the Roloff empire. This is why the family is so fractured. This isn't a simple disagreement that can be solved with a hug and an apology. The current silence between the brothers is not just about hurt feelings. It is almost certainly a legal strategy. Their lawyers have likely advised them not to communicate directly, as anything they say could be used in a future deposition. The family we see on social media, living in separate states and avoiding each other, is a family in the middle of a pre-litigation standoff. Zach is holding the forensic audit card, and Matt and Caryn know that if he plays it, the consequences could be devastating, not just financially, but for the entire legacy of the show. The lie is not just that Jeremy won. The lie is that it was ever a fair contest to begin with. It was a carefully scripted and financially manipulated television event designed to facilitate a hostile takeover of the Roloff family legacy, orchestrated by Caryn Chandler and enabled by a vulnerable and distracted Matt Roloff. The 7% margin was the final insult, a fiction created to sell a betrayal to a global audience. But the one thing they didn't count on was Zach fighting back, not with anger, but with the two words that could bring the whole thing crashing down. What exactly was on those lost receipts that Matt refused to show his son? What is the one expense that proves the entire competition was a fraud from day one? We have arrived at the final piece of the puzzle, the smoking gun that turns this family drama into a corporate cover-up. We have talked about the rigged accounting and the secret meetings, but we need to talk about the physical evidence that was allegedly withheld from Zach on that porch. We need to talk about the lost receipts. According to a source with direct access to the production's raw footage log, the document Zach demanded to see contained a line item that would have immediately disqualified Jeremy. It wasn't just about the lumber or the labor, it was a line item labeled consulting fees. Our investigation suggests that a significant portion of the budget for Jeremy's Battle for the Farm project was paid out to a third-party consultancy firm for brand strategy and event management. Here is the kicker. Corporate records suggest this consultancy firm has historic ties to Caryn Chandler. If this is true, it means the money Jeremy spent on his project was essentially being funneled back into the household economy of Matt and Caryn. It was a wash. It was money moving from the left pocket to the right pocket. But on the expense sheet, it looked like a legitimate business cost. However, because it was paid to a vendor, Matt's team could argue it was a necessary expense for the event, while Zach was out in the field actually paying strangers for labor. If Zach had seen that receipt, if he had seen the name of the vendor, the game would have been up instantly. He would have seen that his father and Caryn were effectively paying themselves to help Jeremy win. This explains the urgency. This explains why Matt suddenly felt unsteady and ended the filming day. It wasn't just stress, it was panic. He knew Zach was seconds away from looking at a piece of paper that proved the fix was in. The producers cut the feed, the crew packed up, and that receipt disappeared into the ether, never to be seen again. But the silence that followed spoke volumes. This brings us to the true tragedy of the Roloff Legacy Trust. This entire competition was framed as a battle for the right to manage the farm, but the real war was over the valuation of the trust itself. You see, if the farm is valued as agricultural land, its worth is high, but capped. But If the farm is valued as a commercial mixed-use resort, the model Jeremy and the developer were pushing, the land value explodes. It becomes worth 10, maybe 20 times more. Matt and Caryn are looking at retirement. They are looking at liquidity. They didn't want a farmer who would keep the land value stable. They wanted a developer who would skyrocket the valuation. By ensuring Jeremy won with a commercial model, they established a proof of concept. They proved to the bank and to future investors that the farm could generate resort-level revenue. This artificially inflated the value of the asset. Why does this matter for Zach? Because if Zach wanted to buy his portion of the farm, he would have to buy it at the new inflated resort price, not the farm price. They priced him out of his own legacy. They manipulated the competition to raise the price tag of the family home so high that Zach couldn't afford to save it. That is the betrayal. That is why he walked away. He realized he wasn't competing for a job. He was being used to appraise a real estate asset for his father's golden parachute. The move to Battleground Washington was not just a change of scenery for Zach and Tori. It was a strategic retreat. By moving across state lines and severing financial ties, Zach protected his own family from the inevitable legal fallout. When the forensic audit eventually happens, and mark my words, it is coming, Zach needs to be clear of the blast zone. The estrangement we see now, the awkward, separate holidays, the silence on social media, it is all damage control. Zach is insulating his children from a grandfather who viewed them as content for a reality show and leverage for a real estate deal. And what about the other siblings? Molly and Jacob have been conspicuously silent. Molly, a brilliant accountant, likely saw through the numbers years ago. Her distance from the show isn't just about privacy. It's about professional ethics. She knows the books don't balance. And Jacob? He has been saying for years that the show is a fabrication. This conspiracy proves he was right all along. The siblings aren't divided by hate. They are divided by an NDA and a desperate need to keep the remaining family secrets from destroying what is left of their parents' reputation. So, where does this leave us? We are watching a family disintegrate in slow motion, funded by ad revenue and driven by a secret acquisition deal. The battle for the farm was the greatest work of fiction TLC ever broadcast. Jeremy didn't win. Zach didn't lose. The only winner was the bank account of the people pulling the strings. The 7% profit margin was a lie, constructed to make the theft of a birthright look like a business decision. Matt Roloff didn't just choose one son over the other. He chose the brand over the blood. He chose the resort over the farm. He chose Caryn over everyone. We need to demand the truth. We need to see the unedited footage from that porch. We need to see the raw P&L statements from that Halloween season. Until then, everything we watch is tainted. Every time you see a commercial for the new season, remember the 7% lie. Remember the Arizona trip. Remember the receipts that vanished when the cameras cut. Do you believe Zach should sue for his share of the legacy? Do you think Jeremy knows he was a pawn in Caryn's game? And most importantly, do you want to see the documents that we have uncovered which outline the proposed Roloff Resort expansion plans? If this video gets 10,000 likes, we will drop the next part, the leaked blueprints video, next week. We will show you exactly what they are planning to build on top of the pumpkin patch. You do not want to miss that. Smash that like button, subscribe to LPBW Update, and hit the bell notification. The truth is out there, and we are the only ones brave enough to dig it up. Stay tuned, because the forensic breakdown is just beginning. This isn't just reality TV anymore. This is a cold case, and we are going to solve it.